the hell is that noise? What the? Oh, 1000 fan art contest notification. Well, let's go check that out. This can wait. This will be a later video.
team10hun@gmail.com by April 2nd.
Oh shit. I'm a little late seeing the video. So when I'm making this, you can see it's March 29th, which means I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 days. I got 4 days to make this art.
No, that deadline is.
I don't know if I can do it, but I'm gonna try. I think I can do it. I have a thought. I think I've got the idea. I think I've got it. I'm just sitting here for a few minutes, kind of just brainstorming a little bit. Come up with some ideas. I think something that'll work out. I'm gonna use my little robot guys as a bit of inspiration. So the idea that I have is I'm going to kind of go a little bit robotic. I'm gonna need, a little bit more refining and stuff, but I want to try and get today. So it's the 29th right now. I want to try to get at least a rough sketch done by the end of today. So I'm just gonna start hopping into that. For the background and kind of the setting stuff, it's going to be looking over like a wooden wall with like spikes and stuff, like a palisade wall, looking through a gap in that. And it is going to kind of be, I'm aiming for like robotic, so like the fingers and stuff are going to be more square. The eyes are they're not going to have like swirls in them, but they're going to have kind of red dot type stuff in there. The ears are they're going to be basically like metal coming out of the sides of the head and going kind of drooping down a little bit, and like, have a rim around them, stuff like that. Like I'm working on developing it still. So that's kind of where I am at right now for this whole fan art contest idea that I have. I did pull up like images of Tarsiers. I've got his art on there, so I can kind of play off that a little bit. But also my goal is, I think I might move it down a little, because what I want to kind of do, the thought is I want to move it down from where it is, so that the hands are going over the text box a little bit, like it's holding it. I want to keep the green, but I want to put, like wood kind of texture behind it, and like wood and log texture behind it. So that's kind of the plan. I shouldn't call it for the day, but I've got some other stuff that I need to do. So I think for this Sunday, I'm going to call it on this. I think this is good progress so far. Like, it's not the most progress because I'm not the best artist. I could have maybe, if I was a better artist with a bit more practice. For where I'm at, I think this is a good starting point. Tomorrow is all about going to be getting the logs set. Actually, I might just do that now. Screw it. Yeah, we're gonna do that. That's the goal. So since I have the concept set up, I'm gonna try to do a bit more with the logs and try and get that get at least the line work in there decently enough that it's ready. So let's hop back into that. All right, so day 2, I knew there were 3 things that I really needed and wanted to get done. I wanted to ink all of the logs. I wanted to get the logs, get their base color on there, and start inking the main character. So starting with the logs, I did go and change up a little bit because they were looking a little too smooth. So I wanted to go and take a few chunks out, put some gaps in them, and just, make them look a little bit rougher. I probably could have done a little bit better with roughing the edges at least, but this is what I did. After that, to give the illusion of like wood grain a little bit and stuff, I just randomly put lines and things into the sides of the logs. Just because I think that gives it like a decent amount of texture. I probably should have, brought up some actual bark and looked to see what bark looks like, but I didn't. I kind of just freehanded and went with it. So not, realistic looking, but then again, what do I do that's realistic? Once I got that done, I made all my line work into a reference layer and tried to go and, just paint bucket, drop all of the stuff in Adobe Fresco. Yeah, it worked for the most part, but there's just one area that had like a few gaps on the left pillar. So I went and did I redo those? Yeah, I erased that and redid the breaking part there. The part to break up the upper point section and the actual like darker wood section, because I am going to make those 2 different colors, like somebody actually sharpened that stick to get to the inner wood. So after doing that, I went and just, I paint bucket dropped all of the darker colors. I didn't do the lighter ones. I don't know why I didn't do the lighter points at this time, but I didn't. And then I started on the actual character, just getting the inking and line work done. So here's a problem that I ran into with this. And it's a bit of a big problem, and it's kind of just in the way that I draw, even though this is like my first real digital illustration thing that I'm doing. I'm very sketchy when I draw. Like, I'm not, super smooth with my lines and everything. And it's just, you can see as you look at it, there are gaps in there. And it's just with, how I draw. And like, I start with and where this becomes a problem is with using like the paint bucket tool for putting down base colors, because I want to use a reference layer and just, drop the colors in. Yeah, that don't work when there's gaps in your lines. So that's something I can do better next time. Well, I have to kind of redo that with this one to be able to do what I want to do. And as you can tell, my character is meant to be kind of blocky because, so the lore behind the character that I thought up was it is a creation from the sea biome that has come to infiltrate the jungle biome for research purposes. I just thought that'd be like, an interesting play between the two, where it is a jungle biome character, but it is built from the ocean, or it is built by a scientist in the ocean biome to kind of scout the area, and it wants to make you think that it's, it's not from them, but it is, and it's there to mesmerize you and make you basically forget that you saw it. But I wanted to go with like a really blocky kind of style because, super advanced robots would technically be like fairly like rounded, but early ones would be kind of blocky. So I wanted to go with this kind of blocky style. It took me a little bit to go and, get everything outlined, and I didn't actually complete the outline in a day. Or I should say I did. So it took me a bit to go and get everything outlined and like just sketch the ideas out with heavy inking. And I did use the symmetry tool a little bit to go and with the eyes to get them both like basically perfect circles. Well, as good as circles as I can make. And I do like how all of this line work turned out. Like, I am a fan of it. What I'm not a fan of is when I try and go and paint bucket it and gray goes everywhere. Because, like I said, the way that I did my lines, I didn't do smooth like transitions from one section to another. I did it kind of sketchy. And yeah, that did not work out in my favor. So I went to a new layer and I just made sure to trace everything and get it all connected so that it just, so that I can do the paint bucket method of base coloring it. And that took me all of like the rest of the time that I was working on this on the 30th was just doing that, was getting heavy lines in that are all connected and sealed so that I can just go and, paint bucket it and call it good for base coloring.
Now, on to day 3.
Okay, so day 3. It is March 31st when I'm working on this one, on this again. I put in a good amount of time yesterday on the 30th, probably about at least 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours on this. And I'm liking the direction it's going. It's just, I need to finish doing a second outline because the first one I did was really sketchy. It was a sketchy inking, and it didn't work as well as I wanted it to. There's a lot of gaps, so I'm just going back and, doing solid line inking. Okay, so first things first, finish up the hand, then I'm going to quickly color all of this. Get my base colors in like I did with the wood, and from there, I have to do a little bit of a background. I'm not sure what I'm going to do in the background, but I'm going to do a little bit of stuff in the background. Maybe that's what I do. Maybe a little bit of a thinky think here. Before starting this, let's go into my mentality with this. I think I'm going to put a sea in the background. I know this thing's supposed to be in the jungle, but it's mechanical. A lot of mechanical stuff, I think, is coming from the sea dwellers, the sea denizens, because they're scientists and stuff like that, while the jungle is a lot of voodoo. So maybe putting a sea thing in the background, like this thing has come out of the sea and is supposed to be infiltrating like a jungle camp. Just a thought there. Might work out a little bit. Let's get into finishing up the main guy. I need to get the eyes set and everything. And I think a lot of this is going to come down to coloring. But yeah, cutting this camera and we're going straight back into working on it.
Make it loud.
When it comes to coloring this illustration, I started with your kind of generic gray. Because, robot metal, I'm like, okay, let's just do gray. At first, I was like, this feels okay. I can make it a little bit better with, adding in a few splashes of color for, the eyes, and I'll change the color on the mouth, maybe in the ears. And it was one of those, I was, okay with it, but I don't think it was really that great of coloring for just what this is. So after getting everything basically already colored in, I decided to change up the base coloring. I went through a few more different iteration colors, finally landing on this kind of light gray blue mix. Because I think that would fit more in with like the sea and kind of the types of metals that you would maybe find with like the type of paints or paint job you would find in the sea. So I decided to go with that. Once I got done with getting my base colors in for the kind of skin or like the metallic shell and the eyes, I decided to start doing a bit of shading. Mostly starting with the shadow, because I knew I wanted the sun to kind of be like up to the left of it. So that's where I wanted the highlights to hit and the shadows to be in the bottom right, or like on the bottom right side. And that's where I just started, kind of messing with the amount of shadows and like how much I want to put in there and just getting it all kind of, getting a good base for the shadows. But honestly, like at the end of the day, I didn't really like what I had done. So I decided to sleep on it, stop working on it, and just come back the next day to actually like jump further into shadows and highlights and adding in a few more details. Okay, so day 4. I am going to start with doing stuff in the background. And by doing stuff, I mean I'm going to take just a super soft brush and I'm just going to go and I'm going to put layers of color in there to kind of, I need to stop saying to basically go for an implication of the sky, sea, and ground by just colors. So lighter blue for the sky, darker blue for the water, a brown-ish, tan-ish little bit for what would be the beach, and then green for grass / jungle-ish stuff. And that's kind of all I'm going to do for the background. It's just one of those, I don't want the focus to be taken away from the character. So a little bit of background, not much. Plus, this is like the first major illustration I'm doing, like I've said a few times in this video. So I didn't want to go deep into the weeds on the background. Once I got the background done, I moved on to shading my character again to see if I can get it to a decent point at this time. I started the same way I had before, just doing like the bottom of the jaw and like sides of the face that would be kind of away from where my sun is going to be at. And this time I liked it. I liked how it turned out so far. Then I worked on the hands a little bit just to get the sides of the fingers and bottom of the arms, like stuff that would be away from the sun, get that all darkened a little bit like it should be. And after that, I moved on to trying to figure out how I was going to do the ears, because I knew for the ears that I wanted to basically have ridges along the outside so that it would be, could give it depth. And I couldn't figure out how I really wanted to do it with how I had it currently. It was just one of the, this was the hardest part for shading because I just could not figure out how I wanted to do it. So I decided maybe breaking up the ear shape would be a little bit better. I tried a couple iterations of, doing a line down the middle of each of them and then breaking it into 8 different sections, or doing a section where it bends. I tried a few different things and I kind of just settled on having a line through the middle of the full ear and then just right at the curb, or right at the angle change. I think that works best because then it can kind of imply that there is a kind of point towards the back of the ear, especially if I go and make that plenty dark back there. It can really imply that there is depth in it. And doing that, it took me a few tries to get it to the point that I'm like, yeah, this works. I colored it and then erased it and then colored it and then erased it 4 or 5 different times before I finally said, okay, this might be enough. Or I think I just, I said, screw it. I'm done with this for now. Let's move on to something else. And by something else, I mean that I just grabbed a lighter color, made a new layer, threw it on Color Dodge, and started kind of just painting the highlights on the top of the head, the top of the ears, just trying to get it, just trying to get something that feels right. I messed with the layer opacity to try and get it, a little bit darker, but not actually dark. And then I tried the ears again. And after this time, I think I just said, screw it, we're going with that. It could be better. I should try doing it better next time, but that's what I left it at for the main character so far. After shading in those ears again, I did jump into working on the logs because there's a few things that I wanted to kind of get across with those. The main thing was getting them to look like they're actually round. So shadows on the edges to kind of imply that they are circular-ish, and then leaving like not bright, but just a little lighter towards the center that is facing the viewer. I then put in some like contact shadows, so it looked like the Tarsi was actually holding onto the log and kind of grounding it into the world and into the picture. Once I had that done, I isolated both of the hands, and I used the same color that I had used for the highlight on the top of the head to highlight the higher parts of the hands. On the character's right hand, it's kind of that like upper arm area and top of the hand that's by the log that would be getting, kind of bounce lighting or just like a little bit of light onto it. And then the left hand is just like the back of the wrist where the light would be hitting like that angle or kind of bouncing onto that angle. And I don't know why I did the little bit on the finger, like the pinky. I kind of did it. It felt right. It may not, be actually right how lighting goes, but screw it. I did it. That's what happens. Then I worked on the mouth a little bit. Because I wanted the bottom part of the mouth to be beneath the log or behind the log, I just went and erased whatever was in front. Because I didn't want to, do all of I didn't want to change around like the sets of levels and stuff. Or like the sets of layers and stuff like that. Once I had all of that erased, I did a little bit more work on the eyes because I thought, just having the big eyes with nothing in there, it just felt wrong. So I decided to take inspiration from 1000's character and do the swirls in the eyes. I did both of those freehand on their own, kind of just like I wanted it to be wobbly. So I just, went with the flow. And I think it turned out pretty well. It looks like something's trying to confuse you. And from there, I just grabbed a slightly lighter color of that same red and just threw on color dodge on the layer and started to just color it in. I made sure to put it behind the lines so that it actually so you can actually see the lines of the eyes. But I just went a few times around with that brush and kept focusing it more and more towards the middle until I felt right, and I just put white dots in the center, like a light bulb basically is what I was going for, and I think that turned out pretty well. So, final day of being able to work on this 1000 fan art contest, I wanted to do a few more finishing touches. First off is just going and kind of putting a darker shadow line on all of the rounded parts of the logs, just to add in that little bit of flair, I guess. Because like I said, I want to make them look rounder, but it's not working out super well. I think that shadow line does help a little bit. Once I'm done with that, I go to the top of the logs, like the top of the log pillars. I add in a little bit of shadow and a little bit of highlights on there. And for the final touch, just to make the impression that there's a body behind the logs and it's not just a head and hands, I put in a little bit of a dark shape in the few openings of the logs. I think it helps. I wouldn't say this is, my best work, but I do think it helped tie it all together, and I do actually I like this as a starting point. But from here on, I want to get better at this. This is a skill that I want to get better at and increase my knowledge of.
Okay, so I have finished my artwork. It's back there. You see it? You see it back there? No, over here. Right there. Right there. Coochie, coochie, coochie. So, that's my artwork. I'm going to throw it up here now so you can get a better picture of it. Now the question is, do I think I have a chance of winning the contest? To be completely honest, Hell no. Because I know there are better artists that are going into this contest that have a lot more skill or just, a lot better at doing stuff like this. Me, I like it. I do like what I did. But, if you think on a technical aspect, it's really damn simple. And it could be better execution. The background is not great. The shading is okay, but not great. And there's not a whole lot of definition and stuff in the logs or really in the character all that much. But, it's kind of a little bit rushed. So I tried taking some time with it. I did this in maybe 6 hours over 4 days. And I'd say 6 to 8 hours. I think I put 2 hours in each day. This isn't the end though. It's not. This is literally a starting point. This is a starting point to doing digital illustration. I've also been working on, stuff with Adobe Fresco and 21 Draw to learn illustration there. I took a few of those lessons into this, but I can always get better. That's the thing about art. You can always do better. And that's the goal. I want to do better with digital illustration, and then I want to take my understanding of all of that, bring it into, more sketch stuff, more physical artwork, and then bring in the understanding of trying to figure out how to use paints and stuff on canvas. I want to learn more about art because I've always had an interest in it, and I just want to evolve my skills. So that's really all this video is about. I hope you guys have a royal day, royal night, whatever it is for you. And please leave a comment what you think of the art. And yeah, hit the other stuff. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see all the random stuff that I'm doing over the next year. And yeah, that's all I got. Peace.